Hey guys, thanks for stopping by. If you like my video, please like and subscribe. Also check me out on Twitch as Floyd Mason.
Hello, welcome back, Spooks fans. We are back. It is time for book number 7. One of the OGs, one of the biggest series in Goosebumps. Honestly, one that maybe kind of made it a bit. It is Night of the Living Dummy. There he is, Slappy, in all his glory, looking like a real creep. Also have the reprinted copy here, so a little different cover. Yeah, like pretty decent. I'd say I like them about the same. I think I like the original one more. I'm a big fan of the colors on it. I think they work well. I think they're a good blend. But yeah, one of those books where both covers are pretty great. I might actually have to do at some point, if I ever get through all these books, is do a rating of all of the newer ones, and kind of put them in order as well and give them a ranking. But we'll see. I don't have nearly all of them, and they jump around the series, which is kind of weird as well. But it is what it is. But yeah, let's talk about Night of the Living Dummy. So this is one of the biggest, storylines that Goosebumps has. Slappy has kind of become like the face to me of it. I mean, back in the day they had Curly the Skeleton, kind of was their thing. He wasn't in any books or any stories. But Slappy, especially in the modern age and, with the new movies and whatnot, he is kind of the main villain. And I think that makes sense. He's so versatile. He's so creepy. He's clever. He's a very, very smart villain. So I think it really works. But this story is odd. It is not, I think, if you read it at the time, I don't know that you'd think that, like, oh, Slappy's going to take over the world. I mean, again, I would say in these earlier books, he is one of the best villains, for sure. But that's kind of an idea only, and we'll get into it. But yeah, a little odd there. So this book is really about two twin girls, Lindy and Chris, who basically, so they're twins, and they're always kind of trying to compete and one up each other. So book starts and they're just arguing. Quite honestly, these are two, just to get it there open, two of my least favorite characters. But I think that's a bit unfair. Chris is one of my least favorite characters. Lindy is fine. Chris just copies her the most. Starts a lot of fights. And this starts at the beginning of the book. They're fighting. The mom makes them for a bike ride. They notice there's work being done on the house. I think it's right next door to them. And so they go in there and they want to explore it. And they're kind of looking around. And then Lindy finds Slappy kind of. She hears like a noise and she goes over, and I think it's supposed to be like a rat or raccoon or something runs by, but it leads her to kind of the trash pile, and she finds Slappy in it. She picks him up, kind of makes him talk. Chris says how lame it is, but Lindy's kind of taken to it. She's like, yeah, I think I'm gonna play with this dummy. I think it's funny. I think it's fun. So Chris is like, yeah, that's stupid, but Lindy wants to keep him. So I think right after this as well, they run into some kids, and Lindy just kind of makes the mouth moves and tell a joke, and the kids think it's hilarious. So right then, already, right after she said it was stupid, Chris starts to get jealous. She doesn't like Lindy getting attention. She wants attention herself. And Lindy, getting that kind of affirmation, getting those laughs, she's like, yep, I want to do this dummy. I think this is going to be something that I do. So Lindy starts to get just kind of some notoriety with it. She starts kind of lining up a few jobs to kind of do like birthday parties. She's taking the dummy to school, getting a bunch of laughs, like working on her routine. And Chris is just getting more and more jealous to the point where she says that she wants one. She's like, I want one too. Lindy's just like, come on, Chris, like, you're always stealing my thing. Have your own thing. And the parents kind of suggest they share them. Now, that's another thing throughout this book is the girls are very annoying. They're very competitive. and they're always just being a pain. But my God, the parents in this book suck. Like, their solution is, oh, one of our daughters found an interest and she likes it, and the other daughter's jealous, so let's just make her share it. And that's just that's terrible. It's a terrible solution. You should encourage Chris to get her own hobby, something she's interested in. She clearly only wants to do it because Lindy is doing it. Make them share. So Lindy kind of holds up Slappy, and Slappy, slaps her. Basically, I think slaps Chris. Claims it wasn't her. So that's kind of the start of the dummy doing weird things. But as we get into it, this is the only one that's done by Slappy, so it should kind of indicate the spoiler. This book and one I just read, I think they're impacted by, and again, I can't remember exactly how it was when I read it, but I think the twist in this book is very obvious when we get to it. And luckily it's not the pinnacle of the whole story, so there is items after it, but we'll get there. So basically, yeah, they don't want to share. The dad ends up going into a kind of thrift store and finds a dummy similar in make to Slappy. I think like the hair color's different, the jacket's different or whatever, and gives it to Chris. And so Chris calls him Mr. Wood, and now she wants to go on and do it as well. However, she's nowhere near as good as Lindy. She's not as good at working him. She's not nearly as funny. She kind of tries a joke on her friend. He doesn't even find it funny. And so, Chris is still getting very jealous. At this point, there's just a bunch of shenanigans happen. Basically, Mr. Wood just starts moving around. So, there's a thing where, like, she thinks he moves. She wakes up in the morning and he's wearing... She had set up this set of clothes that she's going to wear, and he's just wearing them. And then at one point when Lindy picks him up, it's just saying mean things. She's like, it's not me, I don't know what's happening, kind of thing. And so it's just kind of building up with these couple examples where Chris starts to wonder if the dummy is alive. She can't explain it. Lindy swears it's not her. Chris knows it's not her, and the dummy's just moving around or, getting into shenanigans, which she doesn't think... it happens at night. She's like, oh, I would notice if my sister did it, whatnot. So they keep she says it a couple times to the parents through the story too, and it basically gets to the point, and this one I don't blame the parents on, where they're like, we don't want to hear another thing about these dummies. Stop. So the girls kind of have to just argue amongst themselves. At one point, I think we're not yet, but they threaten to take it away. It gets that bad. So Lindy then does her birthday parties. It goes really well. I think she gets more money than she expected, and another person hires her, something like that. So, she's super happy, and Chris is jealous. And then Chris reveals to Lindy that she actually gets to perform at a school concert. They run into, the teacher running it, in the grocery store, something like that, and she told her that she did this, and they're like, oh, that's great, and you can do it at the school concert. Which honestly doesn't make much sense, because Chris, again, at this point is not very good. She doesn't have a routine. She's not funny. She's literally just doing it because Lindy likes it and she's jealous. But she gets to the school concert, and now Lindy's the one that's jealous of her. So later in the bedroom, another event, and they find Mr. Wood choking Slappy. So at this point, Chris is convinced that the dolls are alive. They tell the mom again, and this is where the mom gets pissed and basically threatens to take them away. Then with the concert, these things keep escalating. So it's then revealed that Lindy actually gets the chance to go on TV. So I think it's at one of the birthday parties. But there's someone there who works a local news station and liked her act and told her to go on. So now Chris is pissed again because she's like, well, the concert's nothing now. Lindy gets to be on TV, and she throws Mr. Wood. And she's super apologetic about it, but she kind of, again, is a little scared of him because she kind of thinks that he's alive. And then that night, her and Lindy kind of, Chris is going out to sneak out of the room, and Lindy kind of hears her, and they go out and they find Mr. Wood, and basically he's destroyed the fridge. Everything's out of the fridge, it's all over the floor, he's covered in it, whatnot. And again, Chris is just convinced at this point that he is alive. So they go get the mum. Oh, yeah, and she thinks it's payback for throwing him, basically. She thinks he's alive. She thinks that he's done this to get back at her for throwing him. So we get the mum, and the mum is livid. So she was already mad before. She basically is like, that's it. They're done. All this food is ruined. So the girls, and I think it's Lindy, suggests, like, well, what if we clean it all up? We'll pay for it. I can pay for it out of the money I got from the birthdays. And we can keep the dummies because, I want to keep having them. And the mom's like, okay, you clean it up right now. Pay for everything. We'll let it go. So the girls clean it all up. They go back to the room. And Chris is just still like, I don't know what's going on. And Lindy's like, I think I figured out what's happening. And then the big twist reveal that it was Lindy the entire time. So I think this reveal is pretty weak. Again, I read as a kid, but I can't remember, my actual... Some of them I kind of remember how I felt and like how I was surprised by them. But I can't imagine even as a kid I would be surprised by this one. It's pretty obvious. And I think it's very obvious because every time Lindy holds one of the dolls, it insults her sister. And it happens with Slappy first. And that to me is like the real linchpin of like, well, if it just happened with Mr. Wood, you can make the argument that maybe Mr. Wood is alive. But the fact it happened with Slappy before Mr. Wood was even in the picture, it was clearly Lindy the whole time. I don't know why she did the fridge thing. She ended up having to give her own money, but I guess maybe it was worth it to get her sister back. And she doesn't want to lose Slappy because obviously she's going to go on TV. So, it's a plot point. I guess it's to build on the story to come. But I thought it was a little bit of a weak twist. I don't think there was enough in there to really make me think, even as a kid, that it was anyone other than Lindy. So at this point, Chris is cleaning Mr. Wood because obviously he's got muck on him from the fridge, and she finds a small piece of paper in his pocket that she hadn't seen before. Now, it never really mentions, we'll get to it later, what I think kind of the idea of it is. But basically she says the magic words. I've written them down because I'm not going to remember them. But something like, can't even read my own writing. Kuru, Mari, Odana, Loma, Malunu, Korono. Something like that. These words actually come back a lot in, like, I think they're in the Goosebumps movie and whatnot. But basically they're these famous magic words that are used in the series. So, she says these words, doesn't really know what's going on, but she feels like she sees a glint in Mr. Wood's eye when she says them. So now things actually start getting weird. So now Chris is kind of giving a show to her friends, and they, Mr. Wood is acting super mean. And like she doesn't know what's going on, but again, she doesn't want, she doesn't want to make anything out of it because like she got in trouble before, and Lindy did the thing. And also now it's acting weird, but Lindy thinks Chris is just trying to get her back. So when Chris does the mean voice thing and acts upset, Lindy's like, "Oh, she's just acting. She's trying to get back at me." Then Chris does the spring concert, and again on stage, Mr. Wood says all these mean things, and then he actually vomits on the crowd. So, Chris gets in huge trouble for it. I think they threaten to suspend her. Lindy still doesn't believe her. She's like, wow, she really wants to get me back. She's really upset that I won that one and I tricked her. And so, she's really upset. And then the big reveal, after the spring concert, Chris thinks she's going crazy because she knows she's not doing it. Walks in and finds Mr. Wood alive. So basically, he's now alive. He's come alive due to the magic words. So luckily, Lindy also comes in, sees he's alive. So there's no kind of... I think it would have been a little better if, like, the part with Lindy faking it was shorter, and the part where just Chris knew Mr. Wood was alive was a little longer. You know, I think it's an okay point that Stein does. You know, oh, it's the fake out, and Lindy was faking it, and Chris fell for it, and now you're wondering if Chris is doing the fake out back to Lindy, and this time it turns out to be true. But I kind of like the idea of, like, her trying to get Lindy's attention, and Lindy's just like, no, like, you're not going to fool me. Like, I did it. And he does 2 or 3 more things because, well, he does the spring concert and, like, he does the mean words. It's just one of those things, again, where if you're in Chris's, if we're still in kind of Chris's, like the first part of the book is kind of from her thoughts and whatnot, and from her perspective, we'd know immediately Chris would be like, well, I'm not doing this, so, and there's no way Lindy's doing this, so it must be real. But yeah, so basically they find him alive. He's basically telling them that he's going to make them his slaves and that, they belong to him. So they decide they got to get rid of him. And basically, for the rest of the story, they're just kind of fighting him. So they fight him, they put him in a suitcase, they bury him, and they, the next morning, he's back on the counter dirty. The mom's like, I told you to get that dummy out of here. I don't want to see this dummy. And they're just like, oh my god, like, what happened? The parents then conveniently leave for the day. He comes alive. He starts telling them again how they own him. And as punishment, and, like, again, sometimes I forget the vulgarity and seriousness of some of these books, especially the earlier ones. I think he was I feel like Stein was aiming for a little bit of an older audience. But he kind of says to them, oh, like, yeah, like, I told you not to do this. Now you must be punished. The dog must die. And it's, like, even reading that as an adult, I was like, well, that's pretty heavy. Like, he's just gonna kill the dog. He actually starts, like, trying to kill it, and they have to kind of pull him off it. I think he's, like, strangling the dog, and they got to, like, wrench him off the dog. He tries to run away. Basically, they run out, and he eventually, they're tackling him, they're carrying him again. He eventually gets away, and he gets run over by a steamroller. And squashed. The guy jumps off the steamroller. He's like, "Oh my god, he hit a kid!" And they're like, "No, it's just a dummy. Like, you're fine." And that's kind of the end of Mr. Wood. And you're like, "Oh, okay." Like, he's gone. Words brought him alive. Then they go back in, and Slappy turns to them, and he is alive as well, and is just kind of like, "Oh, thank God that guy's gone. How he was so annoying." And that's kind of the end of the book. So a good twist at the end, having Slappy also be alive. But there's some interesting shadowing through it, because when they first find Slappy, you hear the noise and it's said to be like an animal. There's also the part where when they're burying him as well, they kind of hear some footsteps, so you're kind of led to believe that Slappy went and dug him up. And I think it doesn't really ever totally say it, but I think you're supposed to believe that Slappy was actually alive the whole time. And it's my understanding, and again, I don't think this is clarified anywhere, in this book at least, like maybe he clarified at some other point, but I think you're supposed to know that Slappy put the secret words in his pocket. That's why she didn't see them before, and read them, like, brought Mr. Wood alive, but Slappy was already alive. I don't know that for a fact. Maybe he meant to kind of have them both come alive at that point. And it just happens to be a coincidence. But yeah, there's little foreshadowing things before that could make you believe that Slappy was alive the whole time. But yeah, that's kind of the book. It's a good cliffhanger. And again, Slappy's, like, the end scene and, like, in the episode is kind of cool. Like, him just turning his head and being there is great. But it's one of those weird books where the book is not about Slappy. He's become an icon of the series, and he's basically barreling this book. He has one line, it's the last line of the book, and that's it. And yeah, I don't know about this. It makes it a bit weaker book, in my opinion. I don't actually think there's a lot going on in this book. A lot of the book is just kind of meant to make you think that Mr. Wood might be alive, but to me it was very obvious that Lindy was doing it. And then on the other spectrum, when he comes alive, and especially, like, he vomits kind of the green the green goo, at that point it's very clear, like, well, the girls aren't smart enough to rig this. Like, they're, you know, they show no signs that they have this kind of, like, engineering skill. So he's probably alive now, you know? Like, they read the magic words and he's alive. So there's just not a lot of mystique in this book to me. Again, as a supernatural thing, I think it's fine. Again, I'm not huge on, like, supernatural things, but I think they paint out, with Mr. Wood, that there's some magic words, and they bring him alive, and they, Slappy's probably already heard these words, that's why he knows them, that's why, again, in my head, I think he had that words, I think he put in Mr. Wood's pocket to be read. And so I think within the book, it lives in its own set of rules on the magic, so there's no issue there. But yeah, I think the book would have been better if it had been shorter. The time that Lindy was kind of figuring out was shorter. There's just a lot of stuff of, like, them arguing and bickering and, like, going back and forth about the routines that I don't really care about. Again, I find Chris to be a very annoying character. I don't know why she's so interested in doing the ventriloquism. She doesn't care about it at all. She's not funny. So it's just one of those things, like, I get it, kids like to copy each other, especially the twin sisters, like, they're very competitive, so it makes sense. I just felt it could be shorter, and then have, like, almost like from Chris's again, and she's not sure if Lindy's still doing it, because that to me it would be the more doubtful part. If Lindy admitted she did it, and then he still is doing things, and she's accusing her, and Lindy is adamant, like, no, it's not me. Because then it's like, oh, is he trying to double bluff us, and it's her again? Or is it real this time? Like, what's going on? And I think that would have added a little more mystique. But the way it is now, I feel it was very obvious that it was Lindy, and then I feel it was very obvious that it wasn't. So I was never kind of surprised. So that being said, I think this book is a B level. Yeah, one of from the earlier ones, I think one of the weaker ones, which is funny because, like, a lot of the ones that got sequels, like this one and Monster Blood, I don't feel like they had strong showings, but they had an item that could, be used later. Like, Say Cheese and Die did again, which they do, and I actually can't remember any of the sequels for any of these, so I'm excited to get to those ones. And hopefully Say Cheese and Die again holds up. Hopefully the later Monster Bloods and later... I really remember liking Night 11 Dummy 2. I can't remember the third one at all. I can't remember what the second one's about, but I remember liking it and reading it quite a bit. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at. I think it's weird that, it had one of the best villains and like the idea of it and what you can do with it and how scary the idea of a living dummy can be. But as a story, I think it's just a little too predictable. Chris is just a bit annoying, and honestly, just him being run over by the steamroller is just a bit unsatisfactory to me as kind of a way to get rid of him. So yeah, it's going to be a B. As for the cover, again, I think it's pretty fantastic. I like the color scheme. He's definitely pretty creepy looking in it. But I do find it just a little bland. So that being said, I'm going to give this an A. I would say it's a high A. I thought about giving it an S. It was pretty close. But I don't know. Ones where it's just the image sometimes isn't enough. Like, to me, it's kind of on the same page as like the Mummy's Tomb. It's kind of like, it's a cool picture, it's a cool shot, but I like a little more action or a little creepier. And this one's close. He's real creepy. But again, I think when you look at this picture, at some point he's going to be alive. And like, I don't like ones that kind of reveal part of what's going to happen. There's actually one coming up recently that I don't think is the best, but because it's actually very vague on what happens, it gets a higher mark for me. It gets knocked up a level because it's kind of like, oh, like, I see what they're doing with this, but it's kind of tricking you a little. But yeah, that is Night of the Living Dummy. I wonder. I'm curious about how other people feel about that one. I could see it being very high on people's lists. Again, just it being so iconic. It definitely has its moments of creepiness, but I just think the pacing for me would have been better if it was flipped. I think the Lindy reveal should have been earlier, and then an extended break after it. And anything that was obviously her, like whenever she takes the dummy and mounts off her sister, it's clearly her. So that's gonna do it for this one. I've already read a couple more, so hopefully it doesn't take too much longer to get to them. Make these videos. Again, anyone's watched them, I appreciate you. I know they're a bit long, but I really want to talk about what happened in them and kind of try to break down my thoughts on them. I feel some of the later ones will be a bit shorter because I didn't read them as a kid, or I don't remember them as much, so I don't have as much to say about the little things. But yeah, that's going to do it for me.
Thanks for watching. Please click to check out my other videos, like and subscribe, and come by Twitch under Floyd Mason to join my live streams.